Hey guys, it's the laptop here. Before I start this video, I'd like to point out that none of this footage on this video is my own. Much of it comes from the guys of Wonderland History. They are a lovely group of people with strong dedication to preserving the history of the park. Full credit goes to them. The links to their website and Facebook page will be available in the description below. Besides the point. Anyway, onto the new video. I have wanted to cover this place that I'll be looking at today for a very long time. A place that was loved by many residents of my home city of Sydney, Australia. Once envisioned as a grand American-style theme park in the heart of Australia, unfortunately it fell into the hands of the wrong owner, and all came crashing down. It was the largest theme park in the whole country. Today I'll be taking a look at the former Wonderland Sydney. First we need to take a look at the context of Wonderland and where it came from. In 1979, Sydney's one and only amusement park was the famed Luna Park, located in Milsons Point, standing just below the famous Sydney Harbour Bridge. However, that all changed when on the 9th of June that year, the park's ghost train caught fire, killing 7 people, 6 of them being children. This incident remains the deadliest and most notorious theme park disaster in Australia to ever have occurred. Immediately after this incident, Luna Park was closed down indefinitely. The new management sold the rides and attractions of the original Luna Park, and bulldozed iconic attractions as the Big Dipper and River Caves, before reconstructing the park from the ground up to reopen in 1982. But this incarnation of the park completely ditched the historic portions of the park. Instead it featured American-style thrill rides to little or no connection to the historic roots of the park. The public's poor views of this iteration of Luna Park gave rise to the potential for a second Sydney amusement park. This second Sydney amusement park would be not like any other built before in the country, and not like any built since. It took the best features from American theme parks and put them all into one park, in a large plot of land in Eastern Creek, 35 kilometres west of Sydney CBD, just off the M4 motorway. With backing from James Hardie Industries, Leighton Holdings and Taft Broadcasting, Australia's Wonderland was born. Australia's Wonderland was based upon the other King's Entertainment parks in the United States. However, unlike other ground-up King's Entertainment parks, such as Canada's Wonderland and King's Dominion, Wonderland was far smaller than its sister parks. Unlike the Canadian Wonderland, Australia's Wonderland would be built with only 2 roller coasters, as opposed to the Canadian park's 5. The park was initially built with just 3 areas: Medieval Fair, Gold Rush, and Hanna-Barbera Land, which was common to the other King's Entertainment parks at the time. The park's flagship attraction was the Bush Beast, a name similar to that of another wooden coaster at Kings Island, the Beast. This ride was built as a clone of coasters such as Wild Beast at Canada's Wonderland and Grizzly at California's Great America. The Bush Beast, alongside the smaller Beastie coaster, were 2 of only 3 modern wooden coasters operating in Australia at the time, the other being the Big Dipper at Luna Park in Melbourne. Built to last 30 years, the Bush Beast holds the distinction of being the latest wooden roller coaster built in an Australian theme park. Another of the park's major attractions was the Snowy River Rampage, a rapids ride that was first of its type to be built in Australia, and one of only 2 built in Australia, the other being the infamous Thunder River Rapids ride at Dreamworld, which opened the following year in 1986. However, unlike Dreamworld's model, which was a locally produced knockoff, the Snowy River Rampage was built by Intamin, the original manufacturer of the ride. Like the Bush Beast, the Snowy River Rampage was also built in the Gold Rush area. Another of the park's major attractions was Bounty's Revenge, an Intamin looping starship that was the headline attraction of the Medieval Fair area. Unlike other pirate ship rides at the time, Bounty's Revenge was unique as it was able to swing fully upside down. The ride was only the second of its kind in the world when it was first built. A few of the park's other rides, however, were relocated from other parks, with rides such as Wizard's Fury being relocated from Kings Island. Wonderland was unique to theme parks in Australia as it ran off seasonal operation, usually running its season from September to April. Presently, the only other theme park to hold this distinction is Adventure World in Perth. This trend was taken from Tofts American Parks, all of which at the time ran seasonally. After nearly 2 years of construction, Wonderland opened to the public on the 7th of December 1985 by the New South Wales Premier at the time, Neville Wran, to much fanfare.
Australia's Wonderland is an American concept, American design and with American management, so it was Premier Neville Wran who, with help from a friend, threw the switch today.
If you would, Yogi and Mr. Premier, please let it rip.
After a successful first season in 1985, the park's management suggested the park would break even by 1988. In the initial few years after launch, Kings Entertainment continued to expand the park and invest in new attractions. In 1988, the park opened its water park section, The Beach, the only Kings Entertainment managed property to have its own water park. And in 1989, the park opened the iconic Zodiac ride, an intimate double Ferris wheel which was relocated from Kings Island. But the most significant investment to the park came in 1992, when the park's first and only expansion roller coaster opened in the form of the Demon.
The Demon is now at Australia's Wonderland.
This Vekoma Boomerang originally operated at Brisbane's World Expo Park, which closed in 1989, just months after Expo 88 ended. Luna Park Melbourne was originally intended to install the coaster to replace their Big Dipper coaster, which was demolished in 1989. However, the plans fell through, and Wonderland purchased the coaster in 1990, repainting the track and supports black. With the introduction of the Demon came a new area to the park in the form of Transylvania. All future expansion thrill rides would be constructed in this area. That same year, Taft Broadcasting was faced with long-standing severe financial difficulties and sold its Kings Entertainment parks to Viacom, who rebranded them as Paramount Parks. This new enthusiastic owner meant things were looking very good for these parks. But with these things, there was a but. A big but. In what was an oversight by Taft, Wonderland was not part of the deal, and instead Taft sold its stake in the park to Australian investors. This was the last time an American company had held ownership on an Australian theme park. Since then, no other American company has touched the Australian theme park market. But first, let's have a quick catch up on how the park was doing. Wonderland was doing very well at this time. The park was making money year after year. It was receiving a healthy dose of new attractions each year, although it received the least amount of new rides when compared to other Kings Entertainment parks. Over the next couple of years, the park continued to add more attractions, such as Skyhawk, a Vekoma parachute ride, in 1992, and Fred Flintstone's Splashdown in 1993, an Intamin Kitty shoot-the-chute style ride. In these years, the park continued to do well, but its finances began to plateau. Their next major attraction would not be built until 1995, with the opening of the Space Probe.
Space Probe 7. Something's alive up there.
And seems to be feeding off the city's power supply.
We can't identify the aliens. You are about to discover what it is. 200 feet above the ground. There's only one way down.
This 60-meter tall Intamin drop tower was cutting edge at the time of its opening, and broke records as the tallest and fastest drop tower in the world. Records that would later be shattered by another drop tower in Australia, the Giant Drop at Dreamworld. Space Probe opened as only the second drop tower ride built in the world, the first being the Elevator at Kentucky Kingdom, which opened a few months earlier. It was a cutting edge ride at the time of its opening, in an era where freefall rides were nothing like they are today. Originally, this attraction was named Space Probe 7 to do a sponsorship deal with the 7 Network, the second largest TV company in Australia at the time. With this deal, Wonderland was able to market this ride on a massive scale. The ride was themed to an escape hatch from a futuristic space station, the theming never seen before on an Australian theme park ride, such as fog effects in the queue line. However, all of this came at a cost. When it was built, Space Probe went significantly over budget. It would ultimately become the last major attraction to be installed at Wonderland. After Space Probe's construction, the park's Australian management was struggling to keep the park running with their expensive yet highly impressive purchase they had made. In the same year, competition arose as Luna Park reopened to the public, after an extensive restoration of the park carried out by the Luna Park Reserve Trust and Des Whittingslow. The new Luna Park was comprised of a completely restored Crystal Palace and Coney Island. The park's classic wooden wild mouse coaster last seen at the park in 1971. A Ferris wheel from the previous iteration of the park, many of the former flat rides from Expo 88 that were acquired by Whittingslow Amusements, sharing the same names as classic rides from the park, a reconstructed version of the park's classic rotor attraction, and a new flagship attraction in the form of a $7 million aerodynamics looping coaster called the Big Dipper, named after the original wooden coaster. Unfortunately, the latter was the subject of a long line of complaints regarding its noise pollution, and eventually resulted in a lawsuit filed by the neighbours living in apartment buildings adjacent to the park, which were constructed in the 15-year time period between the Ghost Train fire and the reopening of the park. Ultimately, the park closed down in January 1996 due to a lack of customers, influenced by poor weather conditions and strict regulations imposed by North Sydney Council for operating the Big Dipper, and once again the park was left without major competition. 2 years later, Sega World would open its doors, however were closed by the end of 2000. If you'd like a rundown of that park, the link to the video will be in the description below. In an attempt to generate more cash flow and rectify an ongoing problem with running the park, the investors running Wonderland sold it to a Malaysian property developer, Sunway Group, in 1997. This sale, however, marked the beginning of the end for Wonderland, because this company did nothing but harm Wonderland to the point of death, and what a long death it would be. In these final 7 years of existence, just one attraction was built. Yes, that's right. One ride. That was a chairlift bought for cheap from the former Sydney Showgrounds in Moore Park. The remaining 7 years of the park were uneventful. Profits declined, attendances sharply fell, and little investment was made in the park, if any at all. The owners were so stingy that in 2002, part of the kids area, including the Beastie roller coaster and several family flat rides, were closed down permanently, reportedly due to budget cuts. This area would never open ever again. Finally, after many years of slow and painful decline, on the 16th of February 2004, Sunway announced that Wonderland would close its theme park operation by the middle of 2004, as part of the company's overall rationalisation exercise to exit from non-performing business units. The following day, Wonderland CEO Stephen Galbraith said the park would close its gates due to a number of challenges faced by the tourism and leisure industry in recent years. He cited events including September 11, the Ansett and HIH collapses, bushfires, and SARS. When we took over 8 years ago, the park's future was uncertain. Since then, we have listed the overall performance of the park, completely rebuilt its image and brand awareness, but this has not been enough. Wonderland's 400 employees would get their full entitlements and hope to find new jobs. I doubt the credibility of its reason, but I'll be getting to this a little bit later. The last day of Wonderland would be just 2 months later, on the 26th of April, 2004.
It's closed its doors to make way for an industrial
operation. It's been closed for good, but not before thousands went there for one last...
And at Eastern Creek has shut down, putting more than 300 people out of work.
For more than 18 years, children have been smiling as they walk through these gates, largely for one reason.
I love going on the rides. I like the rides.
Rides that make small kids giggle and big ones scream.
That was the funnest thing of my whole life!
And to think he almost missed out, because this afternoon, Wonderland closed for good. Sold for more than $52 million, the fun park will be replaced with a business park. The former owners blame world events like September 11.
If this park was at a higher level of performance, you can absorb some of those challenges, but it wasn't in that situation at all.
Most of the 300 staff have apparently found new work, some with Luna Park, but they're sad to be moving on. The companies banned them from talking about it. Only Spider-Man was brave enough to break the rules.
Is this a sad day? Of course it is. I'll have no crime to fight anymore. The kids will not see us anymore. Are you sad today?
For most people here today, the last day of Wonderland is all about memories, like remembering the first time you took a ride on the Bush Beats.
Following that day, the park's gates shut for the last time, And from that moment on, Wonderland Sydney was left completely abandoned. And for the next few months, the park was left that way until removal of the park's rides commenced in late 2004. Initially, most of the park's smaller flat rides were dismantled and removed. Many of these rides, most particularly Bounty's Revenge, were moved to Sunway Lagoon in Malaysia, also owned by Sunway Group. As park demolition continued, the larger rides soon started to be taken down. Snowy River Rampage was partially demolished. The Demon was removed from site by the end of December 2004. Demolition stopped for a few months, as Blacktown Council reviewed a potential heritage order for the Bush Beast, before demolition resumed in August 2005. By this point, demolition was complete on Snowy River Rampage. Zodiac and Space Probe were taken down and shipped to Malaysia along with many of the other rides. The Beastie was demolished in a quick manner in the meantime. Finally, demolition was complete by September 2005, when the Bush Beast was finally demolished. The park was now gone. Construction of the park's replacement structure, a business park called Interchange Park, was not fully completed until 2013. So exactly what happened to the park's other rides? Many of Wonderland's flat rides, including the Zodiac, Space Probe and Bounty's Revenge, were shipped to Malaysia's Sunway Lagoon theme park, while many of the smaller flat rides and Bounty's Revenge were later reconstructed and continue operation at the park. The Zodiac and Space Probe weren't so lucky. Neither of the rides would operate ever again. Apparently, Space Probe was never built due to the cost of constructing the footings for rebuilding the ride. The pieces of Space Probe were rumoured to have sat in a paddock near the park for many years, and the ride is now believed to be scrapped. The Demon was sold to the operators of Visionland, now Alabama Splash Adventure, where it was shipped to America, rebuilt, and reopened in late 2005 as a Zoomerang. In 2011, Alabama Adventure's amusement rides suddenly closed down, and while the amusement section of the park reopened in 2015, by that point Zoomerang was already sold to an Indian company, where the now 30-year-old coaster continues to operate a $1 theme park as Recoil, with their Southern Yellow Pine structures now sitting rotting in a landfill. The Bush Beast and Beastie ride vehicles were moved out to a paddock near the park and left untouched for over a decade, after a sale of the same company who bought the Demon fell through. In late 2017, Chris Watts of Wonderland History acquired these vehicles, where they were restored for public display at Artisans Park near Bathurst. As part of the display, the vehicles will be mounted on custom-built wooden coaster rails, making it the first time these coaster cars have moved in 14 years. What about the newest ride in the park, the Sky Ride? Never mind, that ride was used as a means of trying to get rid of Bush Beast. Other rides in the park, most notably parts and boats from Fred Flintstone's Splashdown and parts of Snowy River Rampage, were moved to Beastie's former site and sit there to this day left abandoned. Meanwhile, over at the park, some of Bush Beast's wood apparently still remained on site in 2017. Why did this once iconic attraction close down so suddenly at the height of its popularity? In simple terms, the purchase of the park by the Sunway Group in 1997 was the date when the park went on death row, with its date of execution set on the 25th of April 2004. Sunway Group did not care for the park during its 7-year ownership of the property and basically starved it of any funds, giving the park extremely limited funds for its management, nowhere near the amount to invest in a new attraction, or basically anything for that matter. Instead, what they were after was the land being valuable and it could be easy to sell to developers. The Wonderland was just off the M4 on Woolgrove Road, a prime position for a business park. The knock-on effect from this is that no attractions were being invested in to keep guests returning to the park, because to guests, the park in 2003 was the same as it was in 1997. Attendances went down, and therefore revenue went down. The CEO's reasoning that the attendances were below expectations was for that very reason completely Sunway's fault. If it wasn't for Sunway being incredibly stingy and starving park management of funds, this wouldn't have happened. Remember how I said Sunway closed Wonderland as part of the company's overall rationalisation exercise to exit from non-performing business units? Of course it wasn't performing, not because of the excuses that the CEO was making up that had literally nothing to do with the park, because Sunway never gave the park breathing room to invest in something new. But where Sunway made its mistake in its valuation of the park is the present day. In 2018, Luna Park Sydney is the sole permanent amusement park in Sydney, and 3 years ago announced a plan to invest $20 million in new attractions to replace its existing Huss rides, ironically, which originated in the same place as Wonderland's Demon, at World Expo in 1988. But the long-standing dispute between the park's operators and the neighbours occupying the apartment buildings adjacent to the park have grinded this plan to a halt, with no rides installed as of 2018. The void left by Wonderland's closure has been partially filled by Luna Park's reopening in 2004, but there still remains a massive void. Had it been open today, Wonderland would still be essentially printing money as it was doing in the late 90s, with regular investments in major attractions to keep guests coming back. In this video I won't be talking too much about the Sydney's Wonderland proposal, but if I put it in a few words, it is a gigantic plan that, with good reason, keeps getting pushed and pushed further and further down the line. Needless to say, it won't happen. But let's go back further in time to 1992. What if Keko sold Wonderland to Paramount like it did to its other parks? If that did happen, I'll make a very bold prediction here. The Gold Coast would not be considered the theme park capital of Australia. Instead, it would be Sydney. Wonderland would be the largest theme park in the country, and not Dreamworld. Why do you ask? Because, especially in the mid to late 90s, Paramount treated its parks well. Not just one, but all of them. In terms of coasters, Kings Island got Flight of Fear, Invertigo, and the infamous Son of Beast. Carowinds got Afterburn and Hurler. King's Dominion got Volcano, Flight of Fear, and Hurler. Great America got Invertigo and Flight Deck, and the only park that didn't get much was Canada's Wonderland, which got Flight Deck. Could you have imagined what Australia's Wonderland could have got if Paramount owned it? A Hurler clone, a premier launch coaster, a Vekoma Invertigo, even a B&M Invert. Any of those attractions would have been world class and second to none in Australia. In B&M's 28 years of operation, not a single one of their rides has been built in Australia. If one was built at their peak in the 90s, it would have been put in the park on the map as world class, even for an Aussie park. Heck, even an SLC, as terrible as they are, would be a good coaster for Sydney standards. Now, you can argue shipping costs would rule out multiple coasters, but considering how well Paramount invested in their parks, you would expect us to get at least one coaster. Compare Australia's Wonderland being a Paramount park to the fledgling Dreamworld and Movie World. Dreamworld in the 90s was just beginning to find its feet in the global stage. In 1992, when Wonderland was sold to local investors, Dreamworld had a few impressive attractions, but nothing outstanding or world class. However, competition with Dreamworld would be tough from 1993 onwards because of continuous major investment in large attractions, with Wipeout in 1993, Tiger Island in 1995, Tower of Terror in 1997, and Giant Drop in 1998, the latter two rides breaking records, with Giant Drop being the world's tallest drop tower until 2012. Movie World in the 1990s was meanwhile in its infancy. Only a few major rides were built in the decade, including the Lethal Weapon coaster in 1995. Apart from that, the major rides of Movie World would not open until the 2000s. Had Wonderland been sold to Paramount, it would have grown faster and bigger than both of these Gold Coast parks, combined. Whether that would be in coasters, flat rides, shows, or themed attraction experiences is anyone's guess, but it would have been invested into well enough to keep the guests coming back. Obviously, if anyone knows about Paramount's theme park division, you would know that Cedar Fair ended up purchasing the Paramount Parks in 2006. Would Cedar Fair have purchased Wonderland? Maybe. Cedar Fair could have bought it as part of the package deal and invested into it, or Cedar Fair might have chosen not to invest in Australia. It's anyone's guess really with that one, but I would say that Cedar Fair had bought the park as Viacom was desperate to sell off their parks. Reality is that after Wonderland's demise, so many of the unique American-inspired concepts it brought to the Australian theme park industry became lost with the park's demolition. No wooden roller coaster has been built in Australia since Bush Beast. Proper cohesive themed areas were a concept that became lost in Australia after the park's closure. So many unique rides, such as a family wooden coaster, an Intamin looping starship, a monster flat ride, and a dual Ferris wheel came and went with this park, and they aren't likely to be coming back anytime soon. I highly doubt another theme park will be built in Sydney ever again. If the failure of Wet n Wild Sydney is anything to go by, it has turned investors off Sydney for now. Maybe if the Sydney's Wonderland proposal goes ahead, then maybe, but I don't see that happening either. Even Dreamworld, which was built similarly to American theme parks as Wonderland was, is little more than a shadow of its former self. In a few words, it's a complete dump with aging rides that are maintained poorly, full of sun-faded rides, rusty coasters, and a signature attraction that is symbolic of this poor maintenance, with its launch speed well below the speed it advertises to go. Think of Ardent Leisure as the modern-day Sunway, but their cheaping out eventually caught up to them after 2016's tragedy. In its day and era, Wonderland was an interesting experiment made by Taft at the height of its success to capitalise on the failure of Luna Park, and introduce Sydney to the world of large theme parks. However, a single sale, to an owner who failed to promise its long-term future from the outset, killed the park for good. And what stands in that land now is a business park, another one, like you see every 200 metres down the M4. Not something unique like this place, which impacted on the memories of many Sydney-siders who made visits to the park across its 19 years of operation. Hey guys, for those of you that are unaware, I am continuing on the Lost Darling Harbour series. If you are new to this channel and missed out on the last episode, click on the link in the video or in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like, and if you want to see more, press that subscribe button down below. Thanks.